Hello, everybody, and welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. John Schmeelk, Matt Citak with you. The phone number is 201-939-4513. Hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter if you want to get in touch with us. That way you certainly can. Mr. Citak, how are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Doing okay. Why don't you give us the lowdown? We started a couple minutes late. We wanted to hear what Brian Daboll said at the press conference. Matt had to tweet some stuff out too because Dan Salomon's out today. So, Matt, give us a lowdown at the presser. I'm going to gather my stats, which I forgot to do before we started. Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically all we were out there for was just in a little injury update. This is the first time Coach Daboll has spoken, in the new week leading into Monday night's game against the Steelers. Today was like the normal Wednesday press conference. So Coach Daboll said that Dexter Lawrence, Adoree Jackson, Cordell Flott, and Ty Summers will not practice today, while Jamie Gillen will punt off to the side, and everyone else is going to practice at least in some capacity. So I would say of that list, Dexter Lawrence didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday of last week, got out on the practice field Friday, and then looked like his normal self come game day.
Yeah, he looked okay.
Yeah. Adoree Jackson has missed. He missed last week with I believe this is the neck injury that caused him to miss last week's game. And then Jamie Gillen obviously has also missed the last two games. Matt Hawk has been punting in his place. And then that leaves Cordell Flott and Ty Summers, which I believe these are new injuries. Ty Summers has been on the injury report in the past, but has played through whatever ailment he's...
Yeah, he had to leave the last game, though, with an injury, correct? If I'm not mistaken. I believe he did in the first half of that game.
I think you might be right.
Yeah, and Flott left the game with a groin.
So, yeah, Flott and Summers, I guess, new injuries. We'll have to track those, all of these throughout the practice week to see who's going to be good to go for Monday night.
Yeah, and last week, you remember Brian Burns missed Wednesday's practice and Thursday's practice, so he apparently will work today in some way, shape, or form. There was some concerns with Jalen Hyatt coming off that game when he left with the rib injury. Apparently, he's going to practice in some way, shape, or form. A couple other things that we caught, and then we'll keep an eye on Twitter, see if anything else comes up. DJ Humphries, Brian Daboll, I love what he does this, confirmed that he came and he visited with the team, said nothing is on the horizon, was the quote. So he also indicates maybe strong. He did confirm that he's still recovering from an ACL injury, but wouldn't talk about where he is in that recovery. So whether that has something to do with the fact that he's not signed yet, I don't know. He didn't say whether or not that's the case. So maybe the fact that he didn't hurt the knee until December 31st, which is awfully late. I looked all over the internet. I couldn't find when he actually had the surgery. But sometimes you have to wait 3 or 4 weeks for the swelling to go down. I don't know what that was. He talked to Justin Pugh in March. He was just getting off crutches, so he might not be ready to go yet. Maybe he is, and they don't want to sign him yet. I don't know, but he is recovering from injury. He was asked about the left tackle situation, and he said that both Izudu and Chris Hubbard, right? Chris Hubbard?
Yes.
Correct? Yeah. Will get reps at left tackle, and they'll work through it this week, and they'll decide on game day who they think will be the best fit there at left tackle to start against the Steelers on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
That's about everything, right? I think I got everything?
That is about everything.
Perfect. And then there was some news last night. You had the premiere of the Wellington Mara NFL Network documentary that'll air on Friday night. The Duke. Thank you, Pearson. I couldn't place the title in my head. So at the Paley Center last night, they had a little premiere. It's going to air on Friday at 8 o'clock, I believe,
tomorrow
on NFL Network.
Tomorrow night, NFL Network.
Now, unfortunately, that's the same time the Yankees will be having first pitch against the Dodgers in the World Series. So
you could always DVR it.
Yeah, you could DVR one or the other, exactly, and make sure you get to it. I have not seen it yet, and I'm looking forward to watching it.
Same here.
It should be exciting. The football stuff will be fun, but obviously all the stuff, from World War II, Wellington served in the Pacific Fleet, fighting Japan. So should be a lot of interesting stuff in there about Wellington and the Mara family in general on that documentary.
Heard it was a very good, interesting, cool documentary. Not even just coming, from the Giants world, like just overall. Apparently, great reaction to it last night. I, for one, certainly going to make time to watch it at some point this weekend.
Yeah, me too. Now, the news that came out of last night, obviously it's a media function, so media was there, and they talked to John Mara afterwards, and he was asked whether or not whether or not Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen were safe, whether or not they were going to keep their jobs, and he said there are no plans to make any changes during the season, and he does not, this is the quote, anticipate any changes after the year. But obviously, when you say, I do not anticipate, that means things can change between now and then. It leaves a door open. But as we've talked about here, Matt, continuity is something that this organization craves desperately, and it's something that they have not had for the past 6 years. The last 3 coaches lasting at most 2 seasons. Ben McAdoo less than that. The 3 head coaches before Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll obviously entering his 3rd season. And before that, you had to move on from Dave Gettleman before I'm sure you would like to move on from a GM. You want to give a GM a pretty long horizon to get things done. So I don't think the beat reporters were really that surprised. I know some fans had some big-time reactions to it. I was not that. Look at it this way. If you asked me what I thought John Mara would say if he was asked that question, that's exactly what I thought he would say, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, I'm exactly on the same page. Now, again, as you emphasized, he said, this is how I anticipate it going. As we know, as we've all seen, things can change during a season.
And I'm sure he would have said the same exact thing at this time in Joe Judge's final year, too.
Yes. Without going into specifics, we've had some of the previous few coaches that, probably at this time in their final season, this time of that season, the sentiment probably would have been similar. And then over the course of the final 2.5 months of the season, events transpired, things happened, and it caused the change to happen. So Mr. Mara did not say, this is 100% certain, this is definitely what's going to happen, because you never know what could happen, obviously. Correct. But this did not surprise me at all. I mean, I feel like those of us in the building have felt like this is, what the direction it was heading towards. I, too, was a little surprised about some of the fan reaction on Twitter last night. I thought it was pretty clear that they were going to give Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll a chance to, see this rebuild through. I mean, this is year 3. Obviously, year 1, as we've spoken about at length in the past, year 1, Joe Schoen was pretty handcuffed in what he could do, given the cap situation.
He couldn't do anything. I mean,
exactly.
Not a thing.
And even, when he took over the first draft, the 2022 draft, and this is no disrespect to, some of the people that were there before, but Joe Schoen didn't have his people, set in the front office yet either. His full front office. There are obviously some carryover of scouts between the old regime, the general manager, and the current one, but over the last 2 years, we've seen Joe Schoen bring in more and more of his people, the guys that he wants, the people that he wants here. So that's not to, say, oh, that first draft, you just throw it out the window, but just something to keep in mind. So yeah, it did not surprise me at all. And the fact that this was a tweet from Bill Barnwell earlier this week, and this has been consistent throughout the season, the Giants have the 2nd youngest team in the NFL in terms of snaps played this season. The 2nd youngest.
So that's not roster. That's literally the guys on the field.
Yes, the guys that are actually on the field playing. They have the 2nd youngest team in the NFL. They have shown through the first 7 games, while obviously no one's happy with the record, but there are pieces, there are players that have stepped up in this first 7 weeks that have shown they are going to be core pieces of this team moving into the future, when obviously the hope is that the team will be a lot closer to contending for a Super Bowl. So this news last night did not surprise me. I was happy to hear it, because hopefully that means we can stop hearing the same exact question to Brian Daboll each week at the press conferences, asking about how he feels about his job security.
You really think that's going to stop?
Conversations between him and ownership? I mean, no, because I know some of the reporters are going to continue to ask it anyway.
Well, and unfortunately, and that's what the editors want too for a lot of these papers, also, which is the thing. So
I feel like
it's just the way the business works.
It's true, but I feel like the hope of Mr. Mara saying that last night was to, sort of squash those, I'm not even gonna say rumors, because they're not rumors, just squash those, predictions or thoughts of some of the reporters. But yeah, not surprising. I was happy to hear it. I, for one, would also like to see this coach and GM get to finish what they started and see where they can take this team, because
you can see them building something, and I feel like it can work. Look, has it taken longer than you might like? John Mara even said at 2-5, there is as much progress as he would like at this point. The record's not where he wants it to be, but you can see there's a glimpse of what the vision is right now and what it could be. So anyway, I don't want to spend the whole show on this, but I just figured I'd put that out there. And this is just a quote. I'll read this. This is from Charlotte Carroll's column for The Athletic. I've probably been guilty of not being patient enough in recent years, and that's one of the reasons I'm committed to Joe and Brian Dable and giving them a chance to turn things around. That was the major quote. So, and again, he also expressed that he's not very happy with the 2-5 record and, where the team is. So I'll read another quote. Obviously, we're all very disappointed with where we are right now, but I'm going to say one thing. We are not making any changes this season, and I do not anticipate making any changes in the offseason either. He still has, quote, confidence in both of them. When asked if the team was a long way to go before he can make claims about feeling good, Mara said, absolutely, we're 2-5. So I think that sums that up. All right, quickly on the Steelers, then we're going to get a bunch of calls in, and we'll kind of talk about this game as we move forward here. They're an interesting study. I watched them a little bit this week. I looked at a lot of the numbers, Matt, and it's hard to know exactly what their offense is because it was very different with Russell Wilson behind center as compared to Justin Fields. So you're going on a one-game sample size, which is always very dangerous. But Russell Wilson succeeded with deep passes and a bunch of play-action passes. That's where he had the most success last week. A lot of those play-action boots, those rainbow balls that, frankly, he's one of the best that I've ever seen throw those high-altitude deep balls. George Pickens made some really nice plays outside on contested routes. They have one of the highest 1st and 10 and first half run rates in the league. They will run the football and run it again and run it again and run it again. They have a powerful running back in Najee Harris, who I think is running it as well as he's ever had. Jalen Warren's a good change of pace guy for them. Their offensive line is a little bit shaky. So just to kind of sum that up for me, Matt, and Russell Wilson will hold the football, by the way. And he's always been susceptible to sacks in his career. He's something 4th or 5th longest average time to throw, even with just his one game of sample size this year. Right, I think he's only 100th of a second off to where Justin Fields was. Both those guys tend to hold the football. But to me, if you can slow the rundown in this game, and you give your pass rush a chance against the Steelers' offensive line that should be without their excellent rookie center, Zach Frazier. They already lost James Daniels to the year, who was going to be their starting left guard, I believe. I think this pass rush, if given the opportunity, should be able to wreak havoc, get home, and sack Russell Wilson a bunch in this game. But much like against the Eagles, you got to earn your way to rushing the passer, and that means stopping the run first and foremost.
Yeah, so I actually had a stat pulled up about the pass rush and Russell Wilson this week, so I'm glad you teed me up for it. Last week in his debut, Russell Wilson held the ball for over 2.5 seconds on 21 of 29 pass attempts.
There you go.
So majority of his pass attempts. And that is something he's done, consistently for years now. This is nothing new. However, on the other side, the Giants have generated the highest sack rate and the 7th highest pressure rate on opposing quarterbacks that have held the ball for 2.5 seconds or more. So as you said, in that sense, this lines up as a very good matchup for the Giants pass rush. I will say, though, that against the Jets, who obviously they have a good defense and a pretty good pass rush as well, Russell Wilson, where is it? It was coming up with. He was very effective on go routes, which obviously you need some time to have those go routes develop.
Those rainbow balls, man. He loves
rainbow
them.
balls, yeah, which you need to give your receivers some time to get down the field, hence, the 2.5 or more seconds. But on those go routes, he completed 4 of 6 passes for 113 yards and a touchdown. So if he is given enough time, and, George Pickens is given a couple seconds to run that go route down the field, they have a decent chance at completing the pass. So the Giants pass rush, when given the opportunity, they definitely do need to, get after Russell Wilson the best that they can, at least get into his face. You don't have to sack him every play, but, we spoke on Tuesday about how Jalen Hurts dropped back 21 times last week, and the Giants finished with 21 total pressures. That is a very good rate that, I don't know if it's sustainable, but you'd like to see that happen again this week.
Now, George Pickens, just to give the fans some numbers, might be some maturity issues there for one, but once he's on the field, he's 5th in the NFL in receiving yards.
He's really
I'm not sure if people realize that. He's 3rd in yards per route run. I know a lot of people might not be familiar with that stat, but it's a really good stat to see the overall efficiency of a wide receiver because the Steelers do not pass the ball as much as other teams. They don't have as many pass attempts. So for him to be 5th in receiving yards, despite not having as many opportunities, that's why his yards per route run is so high. So he takes advantage of as many more of those routes than maybe some other wide receivers might. He has dropped the ball this year, tied for 9th in the league for the highest drop rate, 12.5% drop rate. But, he has 4 15-plus yard catches. He doesn't get a lot of yak. His average depth of target is 9th highest in the league at almost 15 yards on average depth of target. He's a go ball guy. He's a downfield guy. And I think given the Steelers' other receivers maybe not being as talented with Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson, Roman Wilson's been hurt. He hasn't been able to work his way into the lineup yet. When he does, I think he's going to be a really good player, but he hasn't yet. I imagine we're going to see Deonte Banks on George Pickens a lot. And it's going to be essential, critical, paramount. Pick your descriptive for him to get his head around when that ball's in the air. Because if he's facing the receiver, Pickens is either going to draw a defensive pass interference penalty or he's going to reach over Deonte Banks and catch the football. So he's going to have to stick with him going deep. He's going to have to stick with it when Russell Wilson scrambles to buy time and not lose his man. And when the ball's in the air, he's going to have to get his head around. Otherwise, it's not going to go well for him on balls down the field.
Yeah, and I mean, the beginning of the season, I feel like part of the buzz around Malik Neighbors was his ability to sort of contort his body in the air and come up with these impressive, very incredibly athletic catches. Well, George Pickens has been doing that since he got drafted into the NFL. Whether it's a go route, just a short route, it doesn't really matter. He's able to do that sort of similar thing with his body in the air where you think a ball is uncatchable and then all of a sudden George Pickens is catching it, getting 2 feet in bounds for a 30-yard gain. So yeah, Deonte Banks definitely is going to have to get his head around, as you said. Hopefully the Deonte Banks that we saw against the Seahawks and his matching up against DK Metcalf is more of what we see this week. But you mentioned Pittsburgh and their just, desire to run the football. So far through 7 games of the season, the Steelers rank 2nd in the NFL in rush attempts. Najee Harris himself, now Justin Fields did play a part in that, but Najee Harris himself ranks 4th in the NFL in rush attempts. And Jaylen Warren is now back and seemingly healthy. He had season high 12 carries last week against the Jets. He seems to be back to 100% health. So even with Russell Wilson under center for the first time last week, the Steelers still showed that they wanted to run the football. They had more rush attempts than pass attempts by a decent margin. I don't know the exact numbers, but a decent amount. This is a team that wants to ground and pound the football. They want to run the ball as much as they possibly can. If they could run the ball 50 times and come out with a victory, Mike Tomlin would do that in a heartbeat.
Yep, absolutely. 2 other items on their offense, and we'll do the defense very quickly, then we'll get to your calls. Tim has been holding for a while. We appreciate your patience. Broderick Jones, who's a second-year right tackle for them, has really struggled this year. That's a spot that the Giants, whether it's Azeez Ojulari or Brian Burns, I think they can attack. And just back on the deep balls from Russell Wilson, since 2016, most completions and yards and touchdowns on deep balls in the National Football League. It's what he's good at. Remember those deep balls you go back to Tyler Lockett, to Baldwin, to DK Metcalf even, towards the end of, his career there. He knows how to throw that deep ball. So
Cortland Sutton last year.
Yeah, Cortland Sutton last year. Great point. So he knows what he's doing, but again, you can get to him if you stop that run game, and he will hold the football. Steelers defense. All right, top line summary, really good. Top 10 in DVOA, yards per play, yards per game, 6th in EPA per play. They're good. They play a lot of single high, whether it's man or cover 3. Their situational stuff is pretty good. 14th in third downs, 4th in red zone. They're especially good on 3rd and short. You can't run the ball against them. 3rd in rush EPA per rush, 3rd in rush DVOA, 3rd in rush yards per game, 2nd in rush yards per play. Really, really good. They don't blitz a lot, but they get home with their front 4 a ton. They have 2 of the best individual pass rushers in the sport in Cameron Hayward, who's more of an inside guy, and then TJ Watt, who's going to line up over the Giants' right tackle, who we assume is going to be Jermaine Illuminor. No sacks the last 2 games for TJ Watt. He tends to do well in primetime games, so that has me a little bit nervous. His get-off is absolutely off the charts ridiculous. It's just incredible how fast he gets off the ball. Then they have Alex Highsmith on the other side, who missed a few games with a groin injury. He's back now, so he'll be challenging the Giants' left tackle throughout this game. Keanu Benton is a pretty impressive young defensive tackle they have inside that the Giants will have to wrestle with. So a really, really good defense that plays a lot of man-to-man in cover 3. Joey Porter Jr. is probably going to be on Malik Neighbors for a lot of this game, and they're going to try to get home with their front 4, something that the Eagles had a lot of success doing last week, only rushing 4 guys. So the Giants' protection and then their receivers, frankly, are going to have to separate against man-to-man coverage because that's what they're going to see a lot of.
Yeah. I mean, starting with the line first, I wouldn't be surprised, and I've said this last week, and we did see it, but I would not be surprised to see the Giants use, some tight ends, some running backs to stay in the pocket and help block for Daniel Jones. Now, against the Eagles last week, that didn't always work. There were some plays that, had a tight end chip a guy, and there's one play in particular, I think it was Josh Sweat, got chipped by whatever tight end, and then
it was the first sack of the game. Bellinger had a nice chip, almost stopped Sweat's feet completely, and then he just ran right past the left tackle for a sack.
Yeah. So, although it didn't maybe have the most success last week, I do expect, especially against this pass rush, to see a similar sort of strategy with keeping Daniel Bellinger, Chris Manhertz, Theo Johnson at times, at least, if not into block completely, at least to do a little chip block, give Daniel Jones an extra second, because as we've been talking about, half a second, even an extra half a second could make the difference between a sack and a completion.
Oh, for a quarterback, a half second is almost 25% of your standard drop back.
Yeah, exactly. So those chip blocks, most of the time, do actually work and come in handy. Obviously, you require your lineman to still block after the chip block, but I think that will be hopefully a little bit better this week. Again, with the presumed second week of this new starting offensive line starting together. We don't know for sure again, but Coach Dable did say before we came in here that at least for today's practice, Josh Azudu would once again get the first practice reps at left tackle. So we don't know what's going to happen, but at least to start, it seems like Azudu starting at left tackle will be the way that things are trending. I would say that this pass defense is definitely a little more susceptible to big plays than the run defense. I mean, as you mentioned, John, they have one of the best, if not the best, run defenses in the NFL. They rank second in rushing yards allowed per attempt, third in total rushing yards, and that's with teams still running the ball against them. It's not like they haven't been trying to run it at all. But their pass defense ranks 22nd in the NFL in yards allowed. So Joey Porter, who had I would say, pretty strong and encouraging rookie season last year, hasn't quite lived up to that this year.
He's been up and down.
But, and I believe we talked about this Tuesday, he did a really good job against the Jets this past Sunday night. He split time covering Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, and I think he had about 40 coverage snaps, and about 30 of them were with those two alone, and only allowed one reception for 9 yards total, and I believe he forced 2 incompletions as well. So
he's very physical. He's going to press you. He's going to try to beat you up.
Yeah, and obviously Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson, 2 of the top, whatever number you want to put, 10, 15 receivers in the NFL.
They're good players.
They're very good players.
Now, he's not going to go in the slot. So if you want to get Neighbors off of him, put Neighbors in the slot. This year, he only has 22 snaps in the slot all year, does Joey Porter Jr. So he is going to play outside and not go inside.
And we have seen Malik Neighbors get put in the slot.
A ton.
A good amount, yeah. I mean, he's obviously going to get his snaps on the outside as well. They're going to line him up all over the field. But Neighbors is lined up in the slot 25.5%. And that's with the first 2 weeks him almost rarely lining up in the slot. Last week against the Eagles, he lined up in the slot a season high 36.6% of the time. I wouldn't be shocked if the number is, similar to that this week.
Yeah, it was 13 in week 1, 8 in week 2, 20 week 3, 17 in week 4, and then 17 last week.
Although the Steelers do, who is their slot corner? I remember reading that their slot corner is having himself a pretty good year.
Yes, I believe you're right. Yeah, I thought he might have been a safety. Is he playing? No, you're right. He is playing the slot for them, Beanie Bishop. He's a rookie, and he had two interceptions last week. He's playing really good ball. So that'll be a good matchup.
That'll definitely be a good matchup. I was going to say, put Malik in the slot more often than not, but their slot corner has been playing pretty well too. So
And Dante Jackson's been a little iffy on the other side, but boy, their two safeties, Deshaun Elliott and Minkah Fitzpatrick, look out. You got to be careful where you're putting the ball because Minkah Fitzpatrick will read you and he will pick you off.
I think that's the best safety duo in the NFL right now.
It's darn close if it's not.
And if it's not the number one, it's top 3
Agreed.
at worst.
I'm with you.
So yeah, they have the Steelers defense. They just have talent at every single level. This is going to be a tough matchup for the Giants offense, but I do think it is, I guess, a doable matchup. Like the offense could, if the offense does what they need to do, I do think that they will be able to move the ball with, at least somewhat success, better than they did last week against the Eagles. I don't really know what happened to the offense last week. We don't have
Last 2 weeks?
the last 2 weeks, but at least against the Bengals, they were able to move the ball with some success up and down the field. Not so much last week against the Eagles, but I'm going to chalk that up to just the first game with the new offensive line with Azudu at left tackle, Malik Neighbors' first game back in a few weeks. Whatever it is, last week is gone. I think if the Giants do what they need to do, and Brian Daboll talks about every week about how the focus needs to be inwards and not as much on the opponent. If they do what they need to do, then the Giants should be able to, score some points and move the ball with some success. And if they do that and the defense plays up to its level that it has been playing almost all season, then the Giants have a chance at this game. It's going to be tough, but the Giants, if they do what they need to do and bring their A ball, I think the Giants have a chance of pulling off this upset win.
Yeah, look, the Steelers aren't going to run away from you. That game against the Jets last week, notwithstanding, it was the first time they scored 30 points in the game since like 2022 or some ridiculous number like that. So they don't run away from you. They have trouble scoring. But the way this game does get away from you, folks, is if you turn the ball over. And this will be what I close with here. Steelers a +9 this year in turnover ratio, second best in the NFL. Their 9 interceptions are tied for third most in the league. They also have 4 fumble recoveries. Do the math. That means they've only turned it over themselves 4 times this year. So they play when you run the ball and you run a lot of play action, you're not going to turn the ball over a lot, right? That's just the way. That's why you play that way. And their defense is taking the ball away. So you got to protect the football. Make them drive the length of the field. Do not give them defensive scores or special team score or short fields. Make them earn it offensively, then I'm with you. You can hang, and if it's a one-score game in the fourth quarter, as we've all witnessed over the years, folks, anything can happen, good or bad. So that's kind of where I'll leave it.
Yeah, I'll just add, the Steelers have multiple turnovers in 5 of 7 games, including 3 games with 3 defensive turnovers.
Let me guess, they're 3-0 in those 3 games.
No, they actually lost the Cowboys game in which
that's right.
they
Dak
turned
had
Dak
the
over 3
picks.
times.
That's right.
Yeah. But all the other games with the multiple turnovers, they did win. Their only other loss was to the Indianapolis Colts, where they turned the ball over twice and did not get any defensive turnovers.
That'll do it.
The only other thing I will add about this Steelers defense is when the Giants get into the red zone, it's going to be tough to get it into the end zone, and that's the Giants' own offensive red zone struggles aside, this Pittsburgh Steelers red zone defense, again, one of the best in the NFL, currently ranked 4th in the league, giving up a touchdown on 42.9% of opponents' trips inside the red zone. That's going to be another big key. And again, I feel like I've been saying this almost every single week, but if and when the Giants get into the red zone, the difference in this game could be whether or not they are able to actually punch it into the end zone or if they have to settle for a field goal.
Yeah,
if they're able to get into the end zone, then again, I think the Giants have a chance.
Yeah, and Giants just 42%, ranked 29th. So,
yeah,
red zone offense. So, yeah, that could be, you're right. Takeaways, scoring touchdowns would be a big part of who wins this game. All right, 201-939-4513. Go check out the Giants Auto Podcast, everybody. A couple good episodes up there right now. We have Paul Dottino and I with Hakeem Nicks and JPP back when they came in for the Fan Fest a month or so ago. Rarely had a chance. I don't think I've talked to JPP once since he left here, so it was really good to talk to him, catch up, talk about his Giants career. That was a lot of fun. And is Lounge up yet, Pearson?
Nice.
And we're going to have the Players Lounge hitting later today. Victor Cruz takes a run at Darius Slayton this week, and they'll have a nice, fun talk about stuff going on off the field. And then tomorrow, I'll have Brian Burns on the Giants Auto Podcast. That'll hit you probably around 2 o'clock tomorrow, 3 o'clock tomorrow, something like that. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, just a heads up, we're not going to do a Big Blue Kickoff next Monday. You're welcome, Pearson. So we're going to take the day off, Half our group is traveling. It's going to be live for like 3 hours before it becomes dead. So we'll give everyone a little bit of a break. No BBK on Monday. And then we'll be back with you the rest of the week at 12:30. All right, 201-939-4513. Tim in Charleston will lead us off today. Hi, Tim.
Hi, John. Hi, Matt. How you doing?
What's up, buddy?
Good. What's up?
Three things. First is on John Mara's comments. I agree with you and him, but I think the most important and most salient part of his comment was he said that his father, Wellington, always preached patience, and that he admitted he hasn't always had it, and that he is going to try to exercise that. And I think that's the key to it, even though he said, no plans to. I think Shane, I think, is rock solid, and I think he should let Shane make the decision on Dable. That being said...
Yeah, and by the way, and just real fast so fans understand the recent history, the shortest tenured Giants head coach in the recent history of Wellington Mara was Ray Hanley. Obviously, he was just here for, a short time, and then Dan Reeves was 4 years after that. So whether it was Jim Fossil or Tom Coughlin or Bill Parcells, until this recent stretch, the Giants did try to keep their head coaches around for a while if they could. Even, in the case of Reeves, he had some success, not great success, but obviously, you weren't just bailing on him after 2 seasons. Go ahead, Tim.
So, yeah, and the thing that I'm sure I've had to defend that type of thinking even before John Mara came out with the comments to many of my friends. I'm talking guys my age, like baby boomers, not young guys. And it's amazing how, Giants fans, we went decades being patient, decades being patient, us older fans. And they're just like, they just flip out. They lose it so fast now. But moving on to the game, first I'm going to say, I've been one of Daniel Jones' staunchest defenders, but I'm done defending him. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to blame everything on him, but, I can't defend him after the last 2 games. And,
Tim, bottom line is the production has to get better.
Yeah. And the only way the Giants win this game is if the defense does 2 things, which is basically they play like they play against the Bengals. Part A of that is, we didn't allow a passing touchdown. We held the quarterback under 200 yards. We held them to 13 first downs. We dominated time of possession, and we forced them to punt 6 times. But aside from that alone didn't do it against Bengals. That's not going to do it against Steelers. The defense has to create turnovers. They need, come on, interceptions, guys. 1 all year is pathetic. And getting to Russell Wilson and force him into some of his, as he has been known to make some mistakes under pressure. We need to make those mistakes, capitalize them, get the offense some short fields, because that's the only way they're going to be able to put up touchdowns.
Yeah, Tim, Russ won't necessarily make a lot of mistakes, at least in my opinion, throwing the ball up when he's under pressure, but he will take sacks, and he will just tuck it and go down and take sacks. So I think that's your best shot here. Maybe you get a strip or something like that. He's done it even going back to his year last year with Denver. He did not throw a lot of interceptions with the Broncos last year. So in terms of throwing interceptions, he does a fairly good job protecting the football. Though I think he is one of his either last year in Seattle or first year in Denver. I know he had double digits, but otherwise he's been very good at protecting the football.
That's probably a misconception on my part, but I'll take sacks and fumbles because that gives you better field position than interceptions.
Yeah, for sure.
And my last thing is, and obviously it'd have to be a low-scoring game, but my last thing is I have a confession that I did 2 things this week that I've never done before, and yes, they are. I can discuss them on the radio. One thing.
You stole my joke before I could even make it, Tim. Go ahead.
I actually bet, I bet like $10 on things, not like any real money, but I bet against the Giants coming up. I figured, you know what, if we're going to go down in flames, at least I'll win back a little. And you're going to like this one, John. I bet on the Yankees to win the World Series. Not just because I think they will, but because they were plus 115. But also because I can never, even though I wasn't born when it happened, I can still be from Brooklyn, Flatbush of all places, never, ever, ever forgive the Dodgers for leaving New York. Even though it was as much Robert Moses' fault as Walter O'Malley's, it doesn't matter. They left. And the 2 teams I would always root for the Yankees against in the World Series are the Giants and the Dodgers. And the other NL teams, though, I'm never root for the Yankees. So I just wanted to leave you with that.
Nah,
hey,
thank you, Tim.
Thanks to
Yeah,
them.
I mean, how can you root for a team that decided to leave the best borough in all the world in Brooklyn? It'd be pretty cool. Just imagine like downtown Brooklyn have a nice ballpark down there. It'd be pretty cool if you
Would
had
be
it.
cool. I don't know if the
do
Barclays
not.
Center would be there though, if that was the case.
Yeah, then your Nets could have stayed in New Jersey. Everyone's a winner. I don't want your basketball team in my borough. Sorry. Keep them in New Jersey.
Where did the Nets play? In
Before
Jersey?
this,
In Jersey.
they played right across
At
the
the-
street.
the
Yeah,
Izod.
at the
Okay.
Izod.
The
Mhm.
empty stadium.
And then they were also in Newark for 2 years,
They were in Newark for I
or
think
more
it
than
was-
that. Was it 3?
It was a couple of years. I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly how many, but yeah, it's because they played in this stadium right here that I grew up a fan. Because I grew up 10 minutes away from here.
Yeah, the Izod was a fun place to see a basketball game. It was fun.
Continental Airlines Arena.
Yes,
First.
that's correct.
That's what I remember it as.
Which no longer exists. I do not.
No,
believe,
now
correct?
it's
No.
literally like a nameless venue that's just sitting there.
Well, but my point was that with our sponsors, Continental Airlines is no longer even a thing.
That is
so,
also true.
United, official airline of the New York Football Giants. 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Let's go to our next caller and say hi to Scott in New Mexico. He's up next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hi, Scott.
Hey guys, I'm going to. I don't mean this as an affront to anybody, but the analysis you guys gave, I just don't agree with, and I'll tell you why. In regards to Pittsburgh,
Okay.
the Giants' offensive line last week, according to PFF, so I'm allowed to talk about PFF since Paul's not on. They ranked the Giants dead last in the NFL in regards to their pass blocking efficiency.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that.
Okay. The Pittsburgh Steelers, as you already talked about, had lost 3 starters from their line, and I didn't notice the difference at all when I watched the Jet game. They looked like a regular offensive line. You wouldn't even have suspected that they had lost three starters.
Well, just
As a
keep in
matter of
mind for
fact.
the season, Scott. Just so you're aware of the fact of the stats, and I'll give you the PFF number because I wrote it down the other day when I was doing my little analysis. They have the 4th highest pressure rate allowed in the league this year. Do the Steelers at 41.5%?
Right. The other thing I'm concerned about, the Giants right now are scoring, or have scored, currently scoring about 13.5 points a game.
Yeah, it's bad.
They're going up against, I think, when they played the Jets, they were the 8th best defense. They may even be higher now, the Steelers. And
Yeah, it's really
I don't-
good.
Yeah, I just don't see. When
So we're
you
in
match-
agreement so far, Scott. So right now we're on the same page.
Okay, I just don't see how you can approach this game and say the Giants have a chance. They may win because on any given Sunday, it happens.
Well, Scott, this is why I think they have a chance to win. I think, don't you think it's very realistic that the Steelers could finish this game with 13 points?
No.
Why?
And again, I just don't see it. I mean, I don't think the Steelers are going to finish with 13 points.
My argument, Scott, isn't that the Giants' offense is going to go out there and put 27 up on the Steelers. That is not the argument I'm making. Trust me.
I know you're not. You're not.
I just think this Giant defense has played well enough. Now, again, you got to stop the run. You didn't stop the run against the Eagles last week. You got to stop the run against this team. That's what I led off with. That's the first thing that came out of my mouth. This is not an explosive Steelers offense. You have their schedule, Matt. List the number of points the Steelers have scored in each game this year for me.
18 in week 1, 13 in week 2, 20, 24, 17, and then the last 2 weeks they've scored 32 and 37.
So based on those numbers, Scott, would it shock you if the Steelers score between 13 and 17 points in the game on Monday night?
I think they're going to score more.
Well, then the
because
Giants might have a good chance of losing the game. But I think the Giants' defense is good enough where they can hold the Steelers to around 17 points.
Well, the Giant defense was ranked 18th, and now they're ranked 25th. And that's the reason why I'm not totally confident in this game. As I said, I've been a Giant fan since '61. I'm going to be rooting for them. But the reality of the situation, as I'm looking at it, doesn't bode well for the Giants. And some of this I put at the feet of Brian Dable. I know you guys did a very good analysis of the scenario with him, but here's a guy that, in my opinion, is not coaching the team the way I would like to see a team coached. He has I think in his own division, he's 1-10. If those numbers are accurate against the teams in the NFC East. I think Washington, he has a little bit better record.
I think they have a tie in there too, right? Isn't there a tie in there too somewhere against Washington? Yeah, a couple years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah, and then some of the things he's doing with Daniel Jones is taking away the confidence of the quarterback, in my opinion.
How so?
I might say, well, if you remember last year, I think it was last year. You remember the famous tablet incident, where he didn't throw the tablet at Daniel Jones. He threw it to the side.
He flipped it to Shea Tierney, the quarterback.
Right.
That's what he did. Yes.
Right. But that was an embarrassment to me for Daniel Jones. And what Daniel Jones needs more than anything else is confidence. And if you listen to his press conference, which was kind of revealing, I'm talking about Daniel Jones' press conference after the game, he never referred to Brian Daboll as Coach Daboll or Brian Daboll. He said Daboll makes the decisions and I didn't like it. So normally, just human nature, when somebody's just calling you by that name, and I may be reading more into it than other. I don't think the relationship is as good as everybody might be making out. And the incident with Ty Banks, who quit, it was the defensive coach that called him out and not the head coach. He may have done it later. But those are the kinds of things I see. And also with Brian Daboll, he said he made the change as he did in the season prior when he left Daniel Jones in the game when it was 40-0 against Dallas. And he said, for the same reason, I want to do a spark. He used a different phrase, but it's basically the same thing. And here he puts Drew Lock in the game with, I think it was 11 minutes left. I'm not positive. It might be 11 or 9.
That sounds right. Something like that.
And he said he wanted to do a spark. What was the score of the game at that time? Even if the Giants scored 3 touchdowns and converted on all 2-point conversions, you still would have lost. And so to me, I don't understand some of the things he's doing that don't make sense to me. And it doesn't bode well. I know the situation with John Mara. There was an interesting aside. Bill Belichick was on the Pat McAfee show and sort of ripped the Giants a little bit. Whether he was justified in doing so, I don't know.
What did he say?
What did he say? Well, he said that he doesn't understand why Azuto's playing at left tackle. He didn't understand why we gave Saquon Barkley away and we've gone over this scenario about whether he should have kept him or not, but he was not in favor of doing that. So those are some of the things he said, and he wasn't convinced that Daniel Jones was getting the kind of leadership he needed to be the confidence he needed to be the quarterback of the New York Giants. Now, this is Bill Belichick, and that's his opinion. I don't have the same opinion in regards to the Saquon. That's past history. I assume there were reasons why it was done the way it was done, and I'm going to go with that. But what I don't like is the fact that the Giant efficiency is not there. I believe Matt hit on some of the points. You have players like Drew Phillips, who's outstanding. Newman, outstanding. You have some outstanding players on the offensive side, but you don't have a team the way I'm looking at it. And I've watched the Giants for a long time. So as I look at it just from my eyes point of view, they don't have a team that's cohesive. And that's the one thing, John, you've always hit upon that I remember. You have to have continuity. And that's the kind of thing I don't see with the Giants. Now, I'm going to continue to watch them and root for them. But in regards to this particular game, I just don't see where Pittsburgh is going to be able to not beat the Giants. But I'm going to be rooting for the Giants anyways. But I wanted to get your comment on one other point, and then I'll...
Yeah, real fast, Scott. Real fast.
Everybody talks about execution. But execution works both ways. You can have the perfect execution on one side of the ball, but unless I miss my guess, there's 2 teams participating in a football game. The other team has to execute also. And if their execution is better than your execution, you're going to lose.
Well, Scott, that's why when on average, the team with the best players is going to win the game, is if you have a better player and both players execute the same level of their ability, the better player is going to win just because he has a higher ceiling in his execution ability.
Right. Well, thank you for letting me get this off my chest, and I'll let you get to the next caller. Anyways, thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate the call. And look, I don't look, Brian Dable and Daniel Jones, as far as I understand, have a pretty darn good working relationship. I know everyone made a big deal about that thing with the tablet. I mean, that was a long time ago now.
That wasn't even this season.
I don't even think either guy thinks about that for a second. I mean, he gave him every single first-team rep this offseason. He never equivocated as to whether or not he was going to be the starter this year. Didn't equivocate after the game last week that he was going to be the starter. I don't see that as an issue. I just don't. I could be wrong. Things might come out later in the year where it's like that was a big problem and I'm not aware of it. That's possible. These guys don't talk about this sort of stuff, but I see him like kind of joking around with him in the cafeteria, a couple months ago. Like I don't see that. I don't see it.
I don't either. I think it's, as he even mentioned, it might be overthinking a little bit. The fact that in one quote he referred to Coach Dable as Dable. I mean,
everyone just calls him Dabes.
Everyone calls him Dabes. If he had said Dabes, would that have made it you feel a little better? Like that didn't make any sense to me. I was standing there for Daniel Jones' press conference in the locker room after the game, and not even for a millisecond did that register as, oh, he just called him Dable. That raised some red flags. In terms of not sensing that this is like a team, I don't really get that either, because last week, obviously, the Giants lost 28-3. It was not a close game. No doubt about it. The Giants got outplayed on every side of the ball. But prior to that, the 5 games prior to that, going back to week 2, every single game was a very close game. Even the 3 games that the Giants lost during that span was a 3-point loss, a 5-point loss, and then the Bengals game, which ended up being 10 points, but
that was a one-score game.
It basically was a one-score game. It was, 10-7 for 50 till the 2-minute mark in the fourth quarter. So those are all close games. The team, despite some of its struggles, has showed that they are continuously fighting till the very last whistle. So I don't really see this whole Brian Dable doesn't have them playing like a team thing. It doesn't make much sense to me. And then in terms of, what he said, his criticism about our analysis of this week's game, I mean, the Giants know that the Steelers want to run the football. And obviously the Giants knew that going into last week's game as well and were unable to stop the Eagles. But the only other time that the Giants' rush defense really struggled against the run this season was in week 2 against the Commanders.
They weren't great in week 1 either, but yes.
No, but I'm talking about like really, really struggled.
That's fair.
They gave up 215 rushing yards to the Commanders. The following week, 69 rushing yards to the Browns. The week after that, 80 rushing yards to the Cowboys. The week after that, 102 yards to the Seahawks. Now, I know the Seahawks didn't really attempt much of the rushing, but almost all of that 102 yards was Geno Smith. Mm-hmm. So the defense has shown that after a rough performance in the run game, they are able to bounce back and be a very good rush defense. And if that is the defense that comes to play Monday night, where they put an emphasis on stopping the run and they force Russell Wilson to beat them through the air, and which we already talked about, Russell Wilson likes having some time in the pocket before getting rid of the football. And the Giants pass rush has been very good at hitting home and getting to the quarterback when he holds onto the ball too long. These are the ingredients of a recipe for a possible Giants win. We're not sitting up here saying guaranteeing a victory. We're saying if the Giants do X, Y, and Z, then this will be a winnable game for them.
The whole point is for us to figure out the path to victory. You want to figure out the best chance they have of winning. I think that's it. And just discuss, I don't know what defensive rankings he's looking at. If you want to look at some of the advanced ones, DVOA has the Giants at 16th in terms of defenses in the league. EPA per play has them at 19th, and defensive success rate has them at 16th. So those are 3 of the major metrics there in terms of.
And if you want to use some of the more basic stats, they're 12th in yards and 12th in points allowed. And even after last week, where the Eagles went 3 for 3 in the red zone, the Giants still have the 13th best red zone defense. And one sort of overlooked aspect of last week's game, because there's, again, wasn't much positive to take out of the game against the Eagles, but Giants held the Eagles, what was it, to 1 for 13 on third down?
Yep.
They did convert on 3 fourth down attempts, but 1 for 13 on third down. The Giants now have the 3rd best third down defense.
Oh, they 3rd, really?
Number 3
in
the NFL. So to say that there's the defense has no chance at stopping the Steelers, who just frankly don't have a very explosive offense, that I don't really understand at all. I'm not saying they will, but the Giants certainly have the pieces on defense to limit this Steelers offense to what they were like earlier in the season and not what they've been doing the last 2 weeks. I feel like that is very fair to say. Now, the Steelers defense, that's a whole other story. But just in terms of the Steelers offense, I mean, the Giants held the Bengals, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins to 17 points. It was 10 points for almost the entire game. You're saying that they can't do something similar to the Steelers and Russell Wilson? That I don't fully understand.
All right, we started about 5 minutes late, so we'll go about 5 minutes later than we usually do. Wilson and Roxbury, and then we'll try to squeeze in one more after Wilson. Wilson, what's going on, buddy? I'm sure you loved the comments last night. I was waiting for you to call in today. I'm sure you're psyched.
Johnny, listen. Believe it or not, I was in Dominican Republic for 4 days, so I was on mini vacation, so I didn't hear anything. All I heard was that Johnny, I love you. You know I love you. But sometimes you try to defend some things that are. Johnny, this kid. Before I get started, just want to say this kid, my league neighbors, super talented. I see red flags already all over the place, Johnny. And to tell you the truth, man, I'm a little skeptical about this kid. I mean, you have a concussion, you go to a concert, then you say, my time is my time, which is completely not true. Then you can word it any way you want. When you say, hey, look at the film, I'm open. They can't get me the ball, it's not my fault, I'm open because they stink. Any way you word it.
Whoa. You just so fans understand, that is Wilson editorializing the "they stink" into there. That's nothing close to what
there were a good amount of added words right there to what Malik actually said.
He didn't. Of course, he didn't say that. But fans, Johnny, I've been watching the Giants for 45 years. That's what I got. But forget about that. Okay. I mean, this is like the Club Med of the NFL, Johnny. This is like an all-inclusive hotel. Nobody's got any accountability. You cannot have a player quit on the field and then tell the fans we're going to handle it in-house. That's not. Giants fans deserve more than that, Johnny.
Wilson, we're going to see if there's any punishment for him. We'll see if there's any punishment on Monday night.
Well, if he starts the game, then obviously that's it. Everything is lost. Because when you have
season's over if he starts, it's all over. It's finished.
No, it's not all over. Forget about punishment. I'm gonna ask you something right now. Because they might win on Monday. Who maybe? But you're going basically you're looking at 2-6 again this year as we did last year. But it's great when everything is blamed on the quarterback. But then, if everything is blamed on the quarterback, why do you? And I love Daniel Jones, but this kid deserves better. Why you keep starting him then? If you're gonna, unless you keep starting Daniel Jones, because it's Brian Daboll and Joe Shane's way out. Hey, we're gonna start fresh when a new quarterback next year. So everything that happens this year, it's nobody's fault because it's Daniel Jones' fault. You take him out with 10 minutes left when you get him slapped around because you wanted a spark. Then you can't wait. He couldn't wait to tell the media, no, but he's my starter. I just want to get a spark. I mean, oh my God, this is like Cartoon Network.
I feel like you're overreacting, Wilson. With all due respect, I really feel like you're overreacting. I really feel like that you're overreacting to some small things here, and you're making mountains out of molehills, to be totally honest with you.
I'm not overreacting, but forget about that, Johnny. Forget about it, because let's just see what happens. Let me ask something. Last time I counted, right, there's 5 offensive linemen on the offensive line, right? There's 5 offensive linemen.
And almost all 5 of them played poorly last week, Wilson.
Okay, but wait a minute, let me ask something. When you're, I wouldn't say the Giants were good. They're average at best. Okay, average. But when you lose, I understand Andrew Thomas is a Pro Bowler. I understand all that. But when you lose one player, you go from average to a complete disgrace?
No, Wilson, they played really poorly. That's not an excuse. The whole line up and down played poorly. That was not just an Andrew Thomas thing. The whole group played poorly.
But this happens. It looks like to the Giants, this happens more than to any other team.
It's the first time it's happened this year, Wilson. It's the first time it's happened this year where they had a game like that this year.
Please don't bring up last year's offensive line, because this year's offensive line is completely different. They have 3 veterans that were not here last year. So before you bring up last year with the loss of Andrew Thomas, just
and a different coach,
please don't.
Matt, all I'm saying is this, man. You know, Indianapolis has won 2 games with Joe Flacco. And we can't get
a Super Bowl MVP, Joe Flacco.
We scored 10 points in 2 games. 2 games at home, we scored 10 points in 2 games. Everything, and Brian Dable is lucky that for some reason the media has just fixated on Daniel Jones. Well, the Daniel Jones is holding back the Giants. Daniel Jones' time is almost up. Daniel Jones shouldn't play anymore. So this is great. This is great because everything is Daniel Jones' fault. This is what bothers me the most. Thank God that the caller before me, thank God he actually thinks like I think, that this guy is not a good head coach. Obviously, he'll be back next year, and Daniel Jones won't be back this year. So let me ask you one thing before I hang up. Let's just say, play with me. Daniel Jones is gone next year because they're going to get rid of him because they can, and they bring another quarterback, probably a rookie. Then obviously, if they win like 5 games, well, they play with a rookie. When is enough though? That's what I'm saying. When is enough, Johnny? And because where do we go from here? Where if we win against Pittsburgh, hopefully they can. You know, it's not Pittsburgh. It's not like a wall beater. We'll be 3-5, and then a little hopes will go up. But if they lose, right, and we're 2-6, where do we go from here? Because I certainly don't have any more answers, and I can't say anything else because I don't know what else. Tell me where we go from here.
Wilson. Look, I know if you start 2-6, you're in a really tough spot, and unfortunately for the Giants, it's been a spot they've been in a lot over the past 8-9 years. All right, since 2017, it's been every year but one. It's not a spot you want to be in, and it's tough to figure out your way forward. But all you can do is go out there, put your best players in the game, and try to win. That's all you can do. There's no other options. There's no other, you can't do anything now to fix things later. That's where you're at. Now you get to the point where you're mathematically eliminated. You can start talking about other conversations and how you want to handle the future and things like that. That's fine. We can have those conversations when we get there, but this team's going to be trying to win games, and whether they win or lose or not this week, they're going to continue to keep trying to win games by putting their best players out there. I don't have another answer other than that.
Yeah, and, as I brought up earlier, this is the second youngest team in the NFL so far this season. So even if the Giants lose this game and they go to 2-6 on the season, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that the Giants can build on, positives that they can take throughout the end of the season to carry over into next year, like development of these young players. I mean, no one's going to be happy if the Giants start 2-6, end up with 4 or 5 wins on the year. No one's going to be happy with that. But if you can at least develop some of your young players, where next year, when hopefully just the overall roster, the talent on the roster will be better, then that is a team that, could be looking to take a next step next year. So just because the season hasn't gotten off to the way that anyone would have hoped it would, that doesn't mean that there aren't things to build on and very small positives. I'm not trying to find silver linings here because, again, nobody's happy with the start to this season. But that doesn't just mean that everything is a complete total waste and that they should just blow it up and start completely over. That sort of logic, which I've seen from a lot of people on Twitter even.
I made a mistake of looking at my replies last night.
It doesn't make that much sense to me. I understand nobody wants to be 2-6, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some positives that you can take out of what has gone on so far this season.
I'll take this as a sign. We'll take one more call here before we say goodbye, but I'll say this first. I'll take this as a sign that we're doing something right. I had people yelling at me last night that we were I think Daniel Jones lovers was the quote that was thrown at me by multiple people multiple times. Now, Wilson's mad at us that we're blaming Daniel for everything and not holding anyone else accountable. I'll take that as a sign that we're talking about this with a little bit more nuance than people sometimes appreciate. I know most of our listeners and our callers do, And I appreciate all you guys. And if you don't agree with us, I appreciate you guys too. That's why we're here to have a debate and talk and argue. That's why it's fun. That's why we're here. But look, guys, week to week, every game is different. The problems are different in every game. Some games, the blame goes on A. Other games, the blame goes on B. Over the course of the season, if the offense scores 10 points, is it going to be all the quarterback's fault? No. Is it going to be partially the quarterback's fault? Yeah, he's the guy that has the ball in his hands every down. All right? But this is a team game. It's 11 on 11. Depending on the week, different people want to get more of the blame based on how they play. Like, I thought the issues against the Bengals were very different than what the issues were against the Eagles last week. Different games, different results, different people. You try to figure out why things went wrong. And it's not as simple as, all right, fix this one thing, change this one person, it's going to solve all your problems. That's not how the league works. That's not how the NFL works. All right? That's kind of where we're standing right now. Eric in Chicago will wrap us up. Eric, what's going on?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
We're great.
Long time no talk.
Thanks for calling in, Eric. What do you got?
All right. Couple of just quick points, and I'll let you guys answer the questions. I'll get off quick here.
Yes, sir.
One, with our old school coaches that we've had for years, like you got Cuff and you got Parcells, even with Reeves, when the offensive struggle, one thing I haven't seen lately is we don't move the line, rolling out of the pocket, things like that, just to alleviate some pressure off one side or another when the line might need help, when a chip block just might not do that. That's one point.
Yeah, and Eric, real quick, just real fast, because I want to give you a chance to respond. I think the reason you're seeing much less of that play action boot stuff than you saw the last couple of years is because they have more confidence in this offensive line to hold up. Now, last week with Andrew Thomas out, maybe could they have mixed a couple of those things in there to try to give Azudu a break? I could see that argument. But I think the reason you haven't seen as much of that this year, and they're still running a ton of play action, but it's mostly straight drop back play action rather than boot play action and move in the pocket, is because I do think they have a little bit more faith in their line to protect this year. Anyway, go ahead.
Gotcha. That's fair. Two is with the wide receivers. Coming from old school, I'm going to be 53. Live and die with the Giants. Just everybody else does that calls in. With the players not being held accountable or foreseen that way, like with Slayton and Wandell, they're young. Well, Slayton's a little bit older, but with these guys dropping the passes that they drop, the frustrating part is they don't get taken off the field. It drives people nuts. And then why is not Hodgins playing? He was not a huge play receiver going to burn you down the field, but everything that was in his perimeter of catching his radius, he caught everything. And then the last thing would be the Deontay Banks thing. Sometimes the hustle thing, I know that all of our veterans and all our old school, our legends, that drives them nuts. Like I've seen Banks make comments and Taylor and these guys with the non-hustling on these plays. If it happens once, it's bad enough. If it happens twice, isn't that starting to be a trend? I mean, with the accountability on some of these things, whether it's dropping passes on the offense or not hustling on defense, you don't see these guys being ripped off the field and, getting chewed out. And those are just my points for today, guys. And I love the show, and we're out in Chicago, and I'm rooting for every Giants play. So I'll talk to you guys soon.
No, thank you. I appreciate the call. And I guess that doesn't seem to be Brian Dable's way. We haven't really seen that much the last 3 years. And I could be forgetting something. Lots happened the last 3 years. Like, I don't remember a lot of, all right, he did something stupid or bad, let's pull him off the field right away and sit him down. That doesn't seem to be his way. I think he wants to try to keep his best players on the field as much as he can. He addresses these issues. Now, it's funny. One group of fans will get mad because Brian Dable, gently tosses a tablet to an assistant coach talking to the quarterback, but then at the same time, they want him to rip these other guys publicly, take them out the field, and bench them. So you want him to be, you're too hard on the one guy, you're not hard on the other guy. So I don't, and again, Eric, I'm not saying that's you particularly, but we get calls on both sides of the ledger there, right? We just got, in the same show, we've got multiple calls about two different sides of that same argument, but he just seems to be more of a, I don't want to out these guys publicly, I don't want to bench them and hurt the team, and he, trust me, he sees this stuff happening, and he talks to him. But Dable, still to his core, grew up under Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. Like, he's an old school coach. He's never going to blow up a guy publicly. That's just not his way. He doesn't think that helps the team long term, but he does handle it in house. And look, we'll see if he decides to make any moves or decisions on Monday night with playing time or not. But either way, trust me, these guys, where you guys think there are issues, the coaches see this too, and they are addressed.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, from day one, Brian Dable made it very clear he's not going to throw his players under the bus to the media. It's never going to happen. He's been here 2.5 seasons now, coming up on 3 full calendar years, nearing that. Can you remember any time that he's thrown a player under the bus?
I can't.
I cannot. It's just not his style. He comes, as John just mentioned, he comes from Bill Belichick. He coached under Bill Belichick, where Belichick didn't do that either. Belichick handled everything in-house, had the same sort of responses that Dable has. Now, obviously, Belichick has many, many Super Bowl rings, so that is a difference. If, Brian Dable had a Super Bowl ring as a head coach, I feel like people wouldn't care so much about him not ripping his players apart in front of the media. That does not mean that he is not holding his players accountable. He literally said, we are handling it, but just doing it our way, in-house. Like, just because we, and this includes us, we don't know what that exactly entails.
No, I don't.
But there's no way that Brian Dable is just letting things like that slide. Like, I promise you, there are conversations that were had since last week with Deontay Banks about his efforts, and that's what everyone seems to be pointing out since Sunday. And I mean, we even saw Jerome Henderson. Everyone's seen the clip of Jerome Henderson on the sideline immediately after the one play in particular, sort of like losing it on Deontay Banks.
It was like that pleading, like, come on, man, what are you doing? What was that? That's what it looked like.
So, I mean, as you mentioned, I understand the Giants the record is 2-5, so no fan is going to be happy, but you have some complaining that he still shows too much emotion, even though I feel like, cut it down significantly this season.
He has dialed it back this year for sure.
By a significant margin, but you still have fans saying he's too emotional and too upset, and then other ones saying that they're upset that he's not showing enough emotion to the public and to the media.
What happens?
It's like a lose-lose situation. And I understand it. It's because the Giants are 2-5. So when the Giants are 2-5, no one's going to be happy.
And look, I'll say this too. Like, if the issues keep coming up again and again, eventually you do have to do things like playing time. Like, that's just, you have to. Because eventually, if that's the only thing that's going to get through to the player, that's what you got to do. Whether or not they're there with Deontay Banks, I have no idea. We'll find out Monday night. I don't know that. But look, we'll see. I mean, he's a young player. Got to get it through to him one way or the other. That type of play is not acceptable. And, I'm sure they've expressed that to him. But the question is that, do they believe that's gotten through without having to do something with playing time or things like that? So we'll find out. Citak, you got the Tino tomorrow, right?
Yes, I do.
12:30. Check it out. And again, folks, no show on Monday in case you missed that earlier in the show when we talked about that. So stay with us. Big Blue Kickoff live as we get ready for Giants and Steelers on Monday Night Football. Matt and Paul tomorrow. We'll see you then, everybody.